Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energies Fiscal Year 2022 Budget Request for Renewable Power. I'm Kelly Leffler, Chief of Staff for Renewable Power, and I'll be moderating today. Before we get started, a few quick notes. Next slide, please. This Zoom webinar is being recorded and may be posted on DOE's website or used internally. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not speak during the webinar or disconnect now. If you do not wish to have your image recorded, please turn off your camera or participate only by phone. If you speak during the call or have your camera turned on, you are presumed to consent to recording and to the use of your voice or image. We will be saving time at the end for your questions. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom. Our panelists today are Alejandro Moreno, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Renewable Power, Kevin Lin, Director of Grid Modernization, Becca Jones-Albertus, Director of the Solar Energy Technologies Office, Bob Marley, Director of the Wind Energy Technologies Office, Jen Garson, Acting Director of the Water Power Technologies Office, and Sue Ham, Director of the Geothermal Technologies Office. I'll turn it over to Alejandro now to get us started.
Thanks, Kelly. Hopefully you can all see me now. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. I and the whole Renewable Power team in DOE are excited to be able to share with you our vision in this first budget proposal under the new administration. And so I'll take a few minutes before diving into the individual offices, and you'll hear from each of them. I'll talk a little bit about the broader context of the priorities in EERE and in renewable power under this administration, and give a sense of some of the broad cross-cutting work that we do and some of the themes that you'll see cutting across each of the individual technologies and offices. So first, I do want to take a moment to talk about the new EERE mission statement that you have here and the big priorities that our entire office and a big chunk of DOE is mobilizing to support. The mission, of course, is as always focused on research, development, demonstration, and even more than on deployment now of technologies and solutions that really drive towards these two carbon goals that you see here: a carbon pollution-free electricity sector by 2035 and a net zero economy by no later than 2050. Also focused on creating good paying jobs with a chance to join a union and ensuring the clean energy economy benefits all Americans. And so how do we do that? There are 5 pillars here that you see on the right. The first is focused on decarbonizing the electric sector, and we'll hear a lot about that today. Of course, renewable power has a key role there, and that's really driving towards that goal of a carbon-free electricity sector by 2035. Just as important across EERE, of course, is decarbonizing transportation, decarbonizing the building footprint, decarbonizing industry, and then also a 5th priority, looking at the decarbonization of the agriculture sector with a specific focus on the nexus between energy and water, which we'll talk about today. It's worth pointing out that the first priority there, which again is a major focus of renewable power, decarbonizing the electric sector, it underpins in many ways the decarbonization of all of the other sectors, much of which, not all of which, but much of which relies on electrification of load. I also want to point quickly to those keys at the bottom to ensure the greatest impact. These are equally important priorities as we move forward on the 5 pillars on the right, focusing on environmental justice and equity, diversity in STEM, workforce development, and state and local partnerships. If we go to the next slide, I'll talk about those a little bit more. I won't go into the individual projects. We'll hear about those more in the office specific presentations, but really focusing on environmental justice and energy equity, making sure that the impacts and the benefits of energy technologies and projects are benefit all Americans and do so equitably, making sure that we have a diverse workforce starting all the way from STEM education, making sure that we have, as we move towards a clean energy transition, that we create jobs, good paying jobs, good stable careers, and that we ensure that we have the workforce that's trained and ready to step in and fill those jobs. And then lastly, working hand in glove with our partners at a state and local level, whether it's at governments, utilities, regulators, recognizing that a lot, if not the vast majority of the decisions that will ultimately affect the energy sector are made at the state and local level. And DOE has a strong role in helping provide the tools, the information, the data, and the technologies that allow the best possible decisions, the decisions to be made by local actors that most benefit them and their communities. So next slide. Very quickly, just a context for what you'll hear from renewable power. The renewable power budget increase, you can see, is an increase of 47%, up to 951 million. And this is where you see how it fits in within the request across all of EERE, a really large increase in the request for energy efficiency, particularly in our federal energy management and WIP programs, and a roughly equally large increase in sustainable transportation programs. And if you're interested in those, strongly encourage you to attend the stakeholder webinars for each of those sectors as well. Next slide. Very quickly, I'm not going to go into the details here on the numbers on the right, but do want to point out the really strong focus in our FY22 budget on deployment and demonstration. Not to say that advanced research or R&D portfolio is not important. It is critically important, and you'll hear a lot about that today. But we increasingly recognize that if we're going to meet the level of ambition and the dates that we have in the targets, that we need more technology demonstrated, deployed, and particularly demonstrated in an integrated way, recognizing that as the power system evolves, in particular, what a lot of the cutting edge research and operational challenges don't necessarily relate only to individual technologies, but how they relate to each other and are operated as part of an integrated system. Next slide. So quickly, before we go into the specific programs and activities, a quick word about some of the themes that you will see that cut across pretty much all of the programs that we have. First, in terms of the overall budget, you see that the largest budget request increases are in solar and wind, and that really does recognize the significant, substantial scale up of both solar and wind deployment that we need to see in most scenarios that get us to a fully decarbonized power sector. But you also see substantial increases in the request, both for water power, including hydropower and geothermal, recognizing their role as a critical regional energy source, as well as an instrumental source of clean, firm, flexible generation that helps integrate variable renewables as well. In order to achieve the 2035 goal of a fully decarbonized power sector, the types of work that you'll see again across all the programs, going sort of counterclockwise on this slide here, starting from the left. First, really accelerating the deployment of the technologies that we have right now, whether that's through policy support, through environmental and social impacts analysis, and working closely with partners to make sure that projects are designed in a way that they can be deployed quickly and effectively. Moving over to the right, traditional R&D focus on cost reductions, and technology advances, whether to meet, for example, the 2 kilowatt hour goal we have for our solar PV, or to meet the 30 gigawatts of offshore wind goal that we have by 2030, which will require validated floating platforms, for example. On the bottom right, this is really focused on the grid research. We're working closely across all of our programs and with our partners in our Office of Electricity to ensure that we address challenges related to both planning and operating a highly variable, renewable, highly power electronic based grid. And on the left, doing work to support US manufacturing and supply chains that both focus on creating jobs, high quality jobs in the US, and also ensuring that the supply chains are secure and not vulnerable to disruption or either create environmental or social impacts that are unsustainable. So moving to the next slide. We'll take a few minutes to talk about 3 of the cross-cutting programs that you'll see in our FY22 budget. I'll talk about 2 of those, and Kevin Lynn will talk about 1, and then we'll move over to the individual offices. So starting with the Energy Storage Grand Challenge, if you've been paying attention to EERE and to RP over the last couple of years, this is a familiar name to you. This program, this is something that really involves almost every office within EERE, the Office of Science, Office of Electricity, focused on bringing together all of the energy storage research that we do, focusing it on specific use cases. So whether it's renewable integration, facilitating an evolving grid, focused on transportation, focused on remote communities, and ensuring that our research covers every part of the value chain, starting from early stage research, the type of materials and interface work that's done in the Office of Science's J. Caesar program, all the way through demonstration and deployment, including manufacturing work. A lot of that's done in our own advanced manufacturing office in the EERE, and really beginning to bring together in a technology neutral way the analysis and demonstrations that help people, including us, understand what technologies and in what combinations are going to be most effective for specific use cases. What are the needs and what technologies are likely to get there? Recognizing that a lot of the information that we have right now about storage technologies isn't based on a lot of field experience, and the characteristics and the performance characteristics that we need really depend a lot both on the use and the overall mix of the grid. The next slide, I'll turn this over to Kevin Lin to talk about the grid modernization initiative.
Thanks, Alejandro. Again, my name is Kevin Lin, and I am director of the director for grid modernization within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Talk a little bit about the grid modernization initiative. So the Grid Modernization Initiative, or GMI, began in 2015 and has leveraged the expertise of DOE offices, national labs, and partners to conduct over $300 million in highly coordinated, cross-cutting R&D on foundational grid modernization topics. GMI focuses on developing the tools and technologies to measure, analyze, predict, protect, and control the grid of the future, and on enabling widespread adoption of these tools and technologies. GMI includes the participation of all the technology offices within EERE, as mentioned here at the bottom of this slide, but it also includes participation from the applied offices, including the Office of Electricity, Office of Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, the Office of Nuclear Energy, and CESAR. As a result of working with the other applied offices, we've expanded our scope to focus on a fully integrated electricity system from fuels to generation to load, including interdependent infrastructures like fuels, communications, transportation, etc. The grid modernization budget includes work that is highly coordinated across the applied offices, which is typically foundational in nature, and grid efforts that are more specific to individual technology office needs. Currently, we're executing a highly coordinated set of foundational projects focusing on resilience modeling, energy storage and system flexibility, advanced sensors and data analytics, institutional support, cyber and physical security, and generation. Moving into the future, the Grid Modernization Initiative will coordinate activities across the department necessary to enable a just transition to a decarbonized power system by 2035 and a zero emission economy by 2050 by maintaining the reliability, affordability, security, resilience of the energy system. This will include addressing key challenges to operating a decarbonized grid, such as accommodating the increase in variable generation, addressing the loss of system inertia, supporting electrification of transportation, industrial, and other loads, and addressing bidirectional flows from the distributed energy resources. And with that, I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
Thanks. And that's back to me very quickly for the energy water nexus, another crosscut that should be familiar to folks that have watched DOE for a while. We've long looked at the intersection and the interdependence between the energy and the water sector, specifically looking at water use in the energy sector, energy use in the water sector. This is becoming more and more critical as both water resources become affected by climate change, and reading the news, certainly seeing that in the West right now. For example, our hydropower program, of course, this is critical to them, is really starting to focus on understanding the impacts of potential impacts of climate change on water availability and timing. That has real impacts both for the energy system and for the water system. But also recognizing as we turn more and more towards our alternative water sources for fresh water, whether it's desalination or municipal water reuse, that those involve really energy intensive processes, and our advanced manufacturing office is working really hard to bring down the energy intensity of water reuse and the cost of water reuse. And so packaging those interdependencies together is a big part of the energy water nexus, and it's evolved considerably since over the last few years, including the announcement of the National Alliance for Water Innovation that the AMO funds. And we're working closely in the RP side, particularly in our water power technology office with them as part of this. So with that, those are the three crosscuts we're going to focus on. And now we'll turn it over to hear about the individual programs. The first one we'll hear about is the solar office with Becca Jones-Albertus, the director of the solar program.
Thanks, Alejandro. Go to the next slide. Our solar office budget request reflects a really balanced approach to accelerating research, development, demonstration, and deployment of solar technologies. In our request, we continue to focus on advancing, concentrating solar power technologies, advancing performance, driving down costs, and in addition, looking at how we can leverage all of the work we've done to develop CSP technologies for electricity production and look toward using those technologies in addition to provide opportunities to decarbonize the industrial sector, focusing on both use of the solar heat for direct industrial process heat needs, as well as driving thermochemical processes for industrial products and fuels. We have our photovoltaic technologies request, which continues to focus on advancing both existing photovoltaic technologies like cadmium telluride and silicon to improve performance and extend lifetimes, as well as advancing the next potential next generation technologies like perovskites. Again, focus is really on improving reliability, lifetime of those materials, continuing to increase in performance and drive toward our newly announced cost target of 2 cents a kilowatt hour by 2030. We have a robust systems integration request where we're focusing on how solar energy technologies integrate with other technologies as well as the grid. And this request reflects the need to look at how solar technologies can serve and impact the bulk power system as well as the distribution system. So in particular, we'll be looking at how solar technologies in partnership with wind and battery storage can be used to provide essential grid services to enhance the reliability of the grid, reflecting the fact that there are already parts of the bulk system today where there's moments in time that we have the grid dominated by wind and solar technologies. And so we really need to get more experience using those technologies to provide the essential grid services that are needed for reliability. We're also looking at opportunities on the distribution system to utilize the nearly 3 million PV systems we have hooked to the distribution system, coupling with growing amounts of energy storage resources to enhance, and as well as other distributed energy resources to enhance the resilience of communities, and also looking at how we can have a robust distribution system that maintains reliability and increased functionality as we continue to add generating resources. We have a significant increase in the request for our balance of system soft cost budget, which is where we're looking to do a number of things. This request is reflecting a prioritization on providing workforce training, on addressing barriers to access to solar by low-income households, and as well addressing some of the really significant barriers to deployment that are related to permitting, to siting, to interconnection. And last, our manufacturing and competitiveness budget request really is focusing on driving innovation across the full domestic supply chain to really enhance opportunities to create and grow businesses and jobs that provide all of the pieces of the value chain for PV as well as CSP deployment within the United States. You can go to the next slide and look at just a few Highlights of some of the activities we're proposing. So first is a $20 million effort that's a national career accelerator where we're focusing on training a very diverse solar and clean energy workforce, providing the training that is needed to meet the expected significant increase in demand for solar energy jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics highlights solar installer as one of the top 3 jobs they expect to grow over the coming decade. And so we're really looking to be providing the training that's needed to have a skilled and well-supported workforce that's ready to fill those jobs and to target that training in the areas where we're expecting to see deployment. Second highlight here is our online platform that we'll be developing to enhance opportunities for low-income households to access community solar. Today, community solar offers in many areas an opportunity to reduce energy bills by accessing shares of a low-cost solar energy system in your area, but connecting those low-income customers who can benefit from this with the community solar opportunities has been a challenge, and we're proposing to develop a platform to really to help fill that gap. I mentioned before on the supply chain, we're looking at a $40 million effort to develop and demonstrate new technologies across the full supply chain to help grow the share of domestic content in PV systems and grow the US solar manufacturing sector. The next one here, I alluded to just a moment ago, but this is a partnership with our Wind Energy Technologies Office, where we're looking to build on some successful pilot tests that have shown that wind and solar energy systems have the potential to provide grid services in a very effective way to meet the needs of the reliability of the grid. But to date, we haven't seen many of these systems being used for long periods of time. And so grid operators really need to have that experience using these systems to provide these grid services. And so we're going to provide funding to have 6-month or longer opportunities to use these systems and really gain that experience for how these systems can best support the reliability of the grid. Last highlight here is a $15 million effort looking to leverage all that we've learned in our concentrating solar thermal power program about developing those technologies. Primarily, historically, we've been focused on electricity production. We're looking here at how we can leverage those technologies to produce industrial products, including chemicals and fuels, and provide opportunities to decarbonize the segments of the industrial sector. I will turn it over here. Bob.
I'm trying to start my video. It doesn't seem to start for some reason. I'm not sure why. There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Marley, and I'm the director of the Wind Office. Although it has been said many times before, I think it bears repeating here that wind energy will certainly play a major role, indeed an essential role, in realizing the President's vision of a robust U.S. economy and a decarbonized energy future. Wind is a proven technology, and it can rapidly scale. We are planning for a total of 500 to 600 gigawatts, that's 5 times today, in 15 years. This would contribute 35 to 45% of all U.S. power by 2035 and create tens of thousands of good-paying jobs in manufacturing, the supply chain, wind deployment, operations and maintenance, and revitalize communities throughout the U.S. and along the coast. However, none of this will happen, unless we can overcome major barriers on land, offshore, behind the meter, in distributed wind settings, and by integrating high levels of wind and solar reliably with the grid. This is the framing that drives our thinking behind our FY22 request. In FY22, we're requesting $205 million across the 4 areas as shown on the lead table. This is driven by a rationale that focuses on what we see are the highest priority sticking points. We also feel that these are uniquely suited to a federal leadership role. These are finding solutions to environmental and siting barriers across all wind types, barriers such as with wildlife, radar interference, and community impacts, demonstrating, as Becca just alluded to, a full up grid services 24/7 from renewable energy at utility scale, de-risking the new frontiers in offshore wind, especially in deep water, and unlocking the potential of distributed wind for rural communities, and aggressive innovation to drive down costs across all wind types by another 50%, so that wind becomes an economic, clean energy option of choice. So let me focus on a few highlights and give some examples, and maybe we can turn to the next slide. In environmental and siting area, we need to understand better how to build, site, and operate projects to minimize negative environmental impacts, be compatible with existing uses of land, water, and airspace, and deploy wind that benefits local communities in addition to the nation. The challenges are many: bats, birds, eagles, endangered species on land and in U.S. waters, radar interference, fisheries, community impacts, and many more. In FY22, increased funding is requested in both the line items of offshore wind and land-based wind to support a broad portfolio of research and, importantly, stakeholder engagement to find sustainable solutions to each of these concerns. The offshore wind resource is potentially twice as large as all U.S. power needs, but in U.S. waters, it is still a nascent industry, which we can help jumpstart. In FY22, increased funding will support innovation in floating platforms for deep water, beyond the continental shelf, and in virtually all locations on the West Coast, Alaska, and Hawaii. New resource characterizations that will be needed to support investor decisions and technology design. A shift in focus in our atmospheric research and modeling from land to sea, where the wind, surface, boundary layers are fundamentally different, in order to support better understanding of the challenges and optimize operations. In the next 15 years, land-based wind is really the tall pole in the clean energy tent. It will provide about 90% of the wind energy in that 2035 goal of 500 to 600 gigawatts. Apart from the environmental and siting barriers, it has been successful in the best wind locations, but continued innovation is still needed to drive down costs by another 50%, so that land-based wind is the least cost solution in all locations. In FY22, funding will support continued research and innovation on taller wind turbines to capture better wind, particularly in the Southeast, ultra-large wind turbines to capture economies of scale, advanced materials and automated manufacturing to reduce costs, tools and software to optimize wind farm operations, and importantly, cybersecurity to protect communications systems and controls. Integration of high levels of renewable energy with the grid is a collective concern for all renewable energy, but wind may have the biggest stake due to its unique variability and scale. For the 30 gigawatts of offshore wind planned by 2030, for example, transmission access and adequacy have been identified as top priorities by developers. In FY22, increased funding will support assessments of transmission adequacy and innovative technology solutions to bring power to shore, managing it, and carrying it to the demand centers. Technical assistance in cooperation with others in DOE to states, regions, ISOs, and RTOs. A joint demo with solar energy, as Becca just mentioned, to prove the robustness of high renewable energy at utility scale and provide a full range of grid services 24/7 over sustained periods of time. And a joint demo with the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology Office for a megawatt scale electrolyzer to produce low-cost hydrogen for energy storage and low-carbon fuels. And importantly, technical assistance to cities and communities who may choose to move toward 100% emissions-free energy. I'm coming to an end now. In distributed wind, which is about 1 gigawatt today, but could grow to 35 gigawatts in 10 years if certain challenges are overcome, In FY22, increased funding will address the problem of balance of systems cost, which can add up to 100% to the overall cost of the distributed wind project. Research will develop packages of technologies that will allow, hopefully, plug and play across a range of power scales from 100 kilowatts to 1 megawatt, and explore common protocols, equipment, and standards that rural co-ops and others could adopt to signal to industry a consistent and low-cost path to entry. In closing, I note that in both the offshore wind and land-based wind line items, we request an increase in funding for innovative STEM and workforce development initiative. This is designed to bring key skills to U.S. industry, engage universities in our research and innovation programs, and broaden participation in our R&D programs by HBCUs, minority serving institutions, and other disadvantaged communities. Talent is everywhere. It just needs discovering and an opportunity. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll now turn this over, I believe, to the next speaker, who I think is the water program. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Not sure what's going on. Okay, so today I'd like to talk to you about our fiscal year 2022 Water Power Technologies Office request. So for those of you who may not be familiar with our office, the Water Power Technologies Office is comprised of two main sub-program areas, our hydropower program and our marine energy technologies program. This year's budget request reflects a 31% increase in funding, and the primary increases is in our hydropower technologies sub-program. So some of the key areas of emphasis that we highlight here on the slide is we're really looking to strengthen hydro's role as both a flexible and firm asset on the grid. This builds on an expansion of our HydroWires program that we've been running over the last couple of years, looking at expanding our analytical tools, technology developments, and bolstering our own efforts for technology assistance for hydro fleet program operators and pump storage hydro developers. We're also looking at how do we start to contextualize, research, and analyze the role of hydropower in the face of a changing climate. So this includes both hydrological impact assessment and strengthening our environmental portfolio. Additionally, we're looking to develop the R&D technologies and demonstration programs to expand hydro in a couple new areas, including powering non-powered dams, and to serve new markets like irrigation modernization. This is building on some of the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years in partnership with both USDA and organizations like the Farmers Conservation Alliance, looking at how can you take advantage of hydropower as potential assets for on-site power production at irrigation districts. Additionally, we're building on some of our technical assistance work to climate impacted communities through our Energy Transitions Initiative partnership projects. We're really trying to ensure that across our portfolio, we are both taking into strong consideration and building out programs necessary to address equity and diversity. Additionally, we're working to continue to drive down the cost of marine energy. This includes investing in advanced materials and controls, building off things like our material strategy, as well as continuing to invest the critical foundational R&D at universities and at our national laboratories, and supporting entrepreneurship and demonstrating systems to meet near-term blue economy markets. Across the portfolio, we're looking to increase our investment in STEM, workforce development, and our partnerships with communities and end users. Next slide. So some of the highlights of our 2022 requests include, as I mentioned, increasing funding for hydro as a flexible asset and our storage expansion. So this includes developing regionally informed approaches to increasing hydropower's flexibility. This is in recognition that hydropower will need to change the way that it operates to increasingly incorporate and help support the integration of variable renewable energy generation assets like our wind and solar technology offices are bringing online. Additionally, we're looking at increasing the role of pump storage, really evaluating how pump storage can serve as a long duration storage asset, but also looking at the application of smaller storage applications in concert with hydropower. We're also looking to develop and advance our community and utility focused assistance. This includes supporting our hybrids work, pump storage valuation, among others. As I mentioned too, we're really trying to deepen our understanding of the role and impact of climate change on the both hydrologic impact as well as the operational impacts both now and into the future. So this includes developing a suite of climate and hydrologic models and decision-making tools to provide accurate state-of-the-art climate information and diagnostic capabilities. This includes evaluating things like what is the impact on basins, as well as how do we start thinking about the development of both the data and tools necessary to understand future forecasting of resource availability. We're also looking to invest and modernize our existing hydropower fleet. So building on some of the work that we've done on digital twin applications for hydropower, cybersecurity planning, as well as a pretty robust set of environmental technologies that we've been developing over the last several years, and building on those efforts, especially in our fish passage for relicensing and new build out of hydropower. We're also looking to expand hydro into non-powered dams and infrastructure. So this would be an increased funding for advanced manufacturing, technology demonstrations, and an expanded effort for hydro with irrigation modernization. Additionally, we are going to be increasing our efforts for STEM and workforce, which is potentially going to include a collegiate competition similar to what we have on the marine energy side. Next slide. And then our marine energy program, as I mentioned, we're going to be expanding upon our newly released Energy Transitions Initiative Partnership projects. This includes expanding to different regions, adding additional communities to provide technical support and build out those relationships with communities that could be partners in the future on demonstrations, and building out those demonstrations based on the plans that we've developed through ETIP. Additionally, we're increasing our investment on in-water deployment of marine energy systems. This includes expanding on our Powering the Blue Economy initiative to demonstrate systems like desalination, including building upon our Waves to Water Prize, as well as our ocean observing systems through things like our Ocean Observing Prize, and both building on and deepening our relationship with NOAA and other partners who are increasingly looking at better access to more energy in order to understand our oceans. And we're also going to be continuing the support of grid-connected potential devices at our Packway facility. We'll be continuing to build upon our foundational R&D, resource assessment, and alternative markets and prototyping for marine. This has included over the last couple of years an increased investment into SBIR, but we'll also be looking at expanding into our foundational work in areas like the potential for marine energy to serve in aquaculture or for thermal gradients to support in both the blue economy needs as well as larger needs. And then we're going to be continuing our work to testing and infrastructure for marine energy. This includes maintaining fund for our TEAMER program, which provides access to free testing for developers and researchers, investments in infrastructure upgrades, and funding for the Packway facility. Additionally, we'll be continuing our work in STEM and workforce, building upon the successful Marine Energy Collegiate Competition, and continuing to support fellowships and other STEM-focused activities to build a robust marine energy workforce. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sue.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Sue Ham. I'm the director of the Geothermal Technologies Office. And just a reminder that we research, develop, and validate innovative and cost-competitive technologies and tools to locate, access, and develop geothermal resources in the US. We're really looking to enable the deployment of carbon-free, flexible geothermal energy in both the electric and non-electric sectors. As you can see in this table, we're requesting a 54% increase over the 21 enacted number. It's a very healthy increase for geothermal, and we could not be more excited about what we're doing with that. Our emphasis in FY22 is really looking at these 3 bullet points down here. So first, we're going to support R&D for technologies to help achieve the carbon-free, pollution-free electricity sector no later than 2035. We're doing that through the Frontier Observatory for Research in Geothermal Energy, FORGE, a drilling technology demonstration campaign, EGS near-field demonstrations, and a new initiative aimed at transitioning oil and gas technologies and talent to geothermal energy and grid policy and regulatory support. We're also looking to emphasize the goal of reducing the carbon footprint of US building stock by 80% by 2035. We've got programs designed to deploy geothermal heating and cooling at federal installations. That's in partnership with the Federal Energy Management Program. Provide tech assistance for communities installing geothermal heating and cooling, and collaborating with the Buildings Technologies Office to demonstrate the market viability of geothermal and highly energy efficient, demand flexible, low carbon buildings. Our programs are really focused fundamentally, as you've heard Alejandro and others talk about, we really want to make sure that the benefits accrue to disadvantaged communities. Geothermal's high capacity factor, small physical footprint, and wide-ranging applications ensure that it can be utilized in urban centers, rural areas, and remote communities. So those are all really important ways to think about the geothermal program. Next slide, please. So in 22, we have a number of programs that we are looking either to continue, such as Forge, or start new. So first, we have the Frontier Observatory for Research in Geothermal Energy, Forge. Many on this call may already know about this big field demonstration project. And one of the exciting things is that in this last year, Utah Forge drilled the first ever highly deviated geothermal well at a rate twice the industry standard. This is such an exciting project, and we're just blasting ahead on this. In FY22, GTO will support the next R&D solicitation that is open to the entire stakeholder community, contributing to meeting administration goals for a carbon-free electric grid. We're looking for a big drilling technology demonstration campaign. In 2018, we had a funding opportunity, enhanced drilling for geothermal energy. And this campaign here in 2022 is really designed to enable field demonstration to prove utility and efficacy to industry and attract future funding through private investment to further the nation's goal of 100% clean energy economy. You've heard a lot about technical assistance and getting into communities, and that's what we have here in this third proposed program, Community Geothermal Heating and Cooling Technical Assistance and Deployment. And what we're really looking to do here with this one is provide technical assistance that will allow communities to demonstrate, deploy, and implement community scale direct use geothermal district energy systems. And whether that's through installation of geothermal heat pumps or through direct use of geothermal fluids, we'll see what we end up with. But the idea is really to get to community scale heating and cooling demonstration. We have a new consortium that we're proposing called the Geothermal Energy from Oil and Gas Demonstrated Engineering, GEODE. And it's a new consortium designed to leverage oil and gas subsurface industry to help solve geothermal energy's toughest challenges. This is really looking at trying to adopt and adapt the oil and gas industry's talent, technology, tools, and assets, right? How can we help that community transition to the clean energy economy while still continuing to push on geothermal's barriers and needs? I mentioned much earlier about the federal partnerships, our partnership with the Federal Energy Management Program for geothermal installations. And the idea here is to make it possible for federal agencies such as DOD, GSA, et cetera, to consider using geothermal energy either to heat and cool it and maybe even to potentially power their installations. And then the last program I'm going to mention today is our Next Generation Connected Communities. This is a partnership with the Buildings Technologies Office to demonstrate market viability of highly energy efficient, demand flexible, low carbon buildings integrated with distributed energy resources. And we really want to cost effectively contribute to America's transition to a zero carbon grid. Thanks, I think that's it for me.
All right, we've had quite a few questions come in. Thank you everyone for submitting those, and please feel free to submit more as you think of them. I think we're gonna start with a few overarching questions. If I could get the panelists to all turn on their cameras. Great. So first, what do you see as the priorities for the grid moving forward, considering the goals of the administration?
I'm happy to take a first crack at that and turn it over to Kevin and then anyone else who wants to answer. Certainly every technology has its own interface with the grid, but for broader grid operation, and I mean, I think the two buckets I tend to think of them in are in planning and in operation. Planning in particular, understanding, getting better data into the variability of wind and solar and the implications on resource adequacy, recognizing that both the ultimate variability and the flexibility inherent in a lot of the resources we have and in storage aren't necessarily all that well represented in power system models and in the planning processes we have. And on the operation side, both from a power electronics perspective, making sure that we have the hardware to operate grids at increasingly high penetrations of asynchronous generation, and also making sure that we have the tools and the experience to feel comfortable operating a power system where the resource mix is changing in ways on a much shorter time frame that we haven't necessarily seen before. And also that we are successfully integrating increasing amounts of aggregated distributed generation and taking full advantage of the flexibility inherent in load, which is also a relatively new phenomenon. So, dealing with multiple different uncertainties around generation patterns, around load, timing, around the electrification of load, and balancing different amounts and different percentages of traditional synchronous generation with asynchronous generation. So those are the big buckets. You might get a lot more and somewhat different specifics from the individual technology offices. So Kevin, anything you want to add, and then to the directors?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think you're right on, Alejandro. I think, I think some of the things, I think one of the things that with this administration, we have a very specific goal about meeting, by 2035 to meet a zero carbon power system by 2035. And that's really focused some of particularly the grid puzzle piece in trying to meet that goal. So, how do we operate the decarbonized grid? How do we think about more and more variable renewable generation coming on the system? How do we think about less inertia on the system? How do we think about more distributed energy resources getting on the system, and how to synergize both the distribution system and the transmission system together? How do we think about infrastructure, coordinating with other infrastructures as transportation is another piece that we have to electrify. Transportation is another goal that we have to think about that impacts grid. And how does electric transportation then work with variable generation? How do we build out the distribution infrastructure that can support that? How can we think about the transmission that needs to be built out in order to meet some of these goals that we have, both through existing transmission lines and through new transmission and through some of the new technologies that have to be developed? I think a lot of the things too, around accommodating, different business markets and business models and policies. How do we think about that? How do we help, how do we provide some of the technical assistance that's necessary to think about how to help some of the people that are making those decisions today know about all the different resources that are available to them, so they can have the broadest sense of information that they can help them make the best decisions where we are today, so we can get to that 2035 goal. And then I think, finally, I think we have to think about things like environmental justice, as Alejandro talked about at the very beginning. I think we have to think about a new workforce. What does the workforce look like? We've had a power system that's looked pretty much the same over the last 100 years. It's about to look dramatically different. What does the workforce really need to look like in order to address some of these challenges? These are all things that we're thinking about as a department and working together, not only with EERE, but with other offices to think about what's the right pathway to address some of these grid challenges.
This is Bob Marley. I just add to all of that is that we did do an experiment with California ISO and Avangrid and San Diego Power and Light using assets that were solar, wind, and storage. And we successfully demonstrated that it could be done, but it was a pretty small scale. It was like 3 megawatts. And it was sustained over a long period of time. But this needs to be, when you talk about the scale that Kevin and Alejandro were just talking about, with decarbonizing the grid with solar and wind perhaps representing 75, 80 or plus % of all the power, that is a very complex challenge. And we need to really put a lot of effort into making sure that we can provide a robust service, full service, reliably, sustainably, without any interruptions. And that's what we're working on in FY22.
Okay, so the next question we have, what are your offices doing to broaden external support and prepare the clean energy workforce for a net zero economy?
Becca, you wanna take the first crack at this one?
Sure. So as we look to a 100% clean grid by 2035 and putting our economy on a path to a net zero economy by 2050, that obviously will result in a lot of opportunities for growth in the clean energy workforce. And so we're looking very carefully at how we can best integrate those opportunities, how we can train a workforce that can not just be a workforce for one technology, but a workforce truly for the clean energy technology, so that there's pathways to good careers, to career growth, and where we're providing training that is coupled to where we expect to see opportunities for those jobs to grow, so that the training that we have is tailored really to prepare folks directly to enter the workforce. So we're really focused on good jobs, well-skilled workforce, and cross-training for a clean energy economy.
So the next question, and this is directed to Bob, but I think others might have some thoughts related to their technologies. But given the social dimensions and competing uses can pose large barriers to the energy transition, and research can help advance a just transition, how does Wind Energy Technologies Office plan to invest research dollars into community impacts, especially for offshore wind?
Oh, well, that's a big question. We have recently we've been working with NOAA and the Sea Grant program to look at the impact as just one example of some of these offshore wind development sites on fishing and fisheries. And it's designed essentially to work directly with the affected communities to understand better what their concerns are, and try to identify solutions that are not just for the wind plant, but technologies that might mitigate some of these impacts. That's just one example. Is that we have others. We've been working with communities in land-based situations to identify kind of what are the attributes that in some cases lead to widespread acceptance, and in other cases lead to opposition, and what are the processes that lead to those outcomes. And it's very interesting. Often, if you involve the communities at the very beginning, rather than say come in at the end with a proposal, you find that you make friends and influence others and grow support over time. And we're providing research and technical assistance to communities that would invite us to do so. I mean, we're not going to intrude, but we have a lot of help in our laboratories that can be provided to communities that are thinking about this. They want to make informed discussions and good debates and decisions. And I think I said in my opening remarks, we want wind not just to benefit the nation in clean power and reduce pollution and environmental justice and other things. We want it to benefit local communities. Really, if you can prove that these things benefit local communities and there are true benefits there, everything is a lot easier. But if we don't do it, it could be a showstopper for a lot of our plans. So we're taking it very seriously.
If no one else would like to weigh in on that question, I have a question that I'd like to direct at Jen. I saw EERE is seeking feedback on how to remove participation barriers in funding programs and encourage first-time applicants to work with DOE. What's the motivation behind this? What new programs might this lead to? And others, again, feel free to weigh in.
Sure, thanks, Kelly. Yes, so just last week we released a request for information that crossed between both the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy and the Office of Economic Diversity. One of the things that we've recognized and we continue to recognize when it comes to both attracting new entrants or a more diverse set of entrepreneurs or solvers is it is prohibitively difficult to actually apply into federal funding in most cases. Some of the ways that it has been constructed is just due to either laws or regulations, and there are good reasons why we have high barrier thresholds for some of our work to ensure delivery of very highly technical work. But if we're serious about increasing diversity and representation across all of our work, that needs to also be addressed within who and how we fund our work. So whether that's on being more reflective about providing the types of resources or access to information or outreach or engagement strategies that engages a broader set of stakeholders and solvers, it's going to be one of the critical ways that we meet a lot of the mission of the Justice 40 initiative, which is really aimed at 40% distribution of benefits under a climate agenda. And part of that includes how we address more systemic challenges to applying into federal funding. So in terms of the outcomes of the work, that's one of the reasons why we're seeking this through a request for information, is so that we hear from as broad a community as possible about what are the things that DOE needs to think about strategically to increase its availability of resources to help achieve a climate agenda.
Okay. Sue, can you provide any additional information on geothermal initiatives and how you plan to engage the oil and gas sector?
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks for that question. So as we transition away from fossil fuel sources towards a clean energy future, we really want to leverage the expertise and the assets from oil and gas to put both technology and people to work in geothermal. And a couple of the programs that I talked about as being our big ones for FY22 really play into this. So two of those are the drilling demonstration, where that will be open to oil and gas technologies as well as geothermal technologies. We're really just looking to how can we demonstrate new drilling techniques, tools, technologies to ensure that drilling is faster, cheaper, easier, less downtime, et cetera. The second one is Geode, right? So that is that consortium I talked about with bringing over the talent, the technologies, the assets, et cetera, from the oil and gas industry. And within Geode, in this first year of Geode, what we're really looking for is to create roadmaps in a whole bunch of different areas of the overlap between geothermal and the oil and gas industry. And we also want to take a look at the regulation state by state of turning oil and gas assets into potential geothermal assets. This is very much controlled at sort of the state level for those regulations. So we're going to spend some good time, funding, and energy in that first year looking at some of those things. And that's how we really plan to bring oil and gas into partnership with geothermal in FY22.
Question for Becca. There have been some reports that have stated that distributed solar reduces utility sales, but not utility fixed costs, contributing to higher bills for low-income households. Are there any activities in the Solar Energy Technologies Office that are looking into this equity issue?
Thanks for that question. Yes, so we're looking a lot at the impacts of solar installations on the costs and values of electricity for all participants. In addition, we have a study that Congress has required us to fund the national academies to have a study on net metering, which will address some of these issues as well, where EERE is working together with the Office of Electricity to develop a statement of work for that project. So it's certainly something we're looking at. There's not a single answer to how the impacts of solar apply. It's very situational, and so there's a lot of modeling and looking at different geographies and different penetration levels and things that are needed there.
Just seeing if we have time for one more question. I'm going to make it a good one. Jen, what should we expect over the next year from the Powering the Blue Economy initiative?
And my favorite topic. So the Powering the Blue Economy initiative, which we had launched about 2 years ago, we have some really exciting culminations this year that includes in-water deployments of our Waves to Water prize, demonstrating up to 5 devices in the water in Jeanette's pier producing clean water from wave energy. We'll also have in-water deployments of our Ocean Observing Prize. We're going to be expanding on our SBIR work. So we're bringing kind of from the concept and kind of the way that we've been sort of conceptually thinking about it from a scoping effort to really demonstrating the availability of these technologies to make an impact in the blue economy. So we're really excited to move from, prize and design stages into actual in-water deployments.
And with that, it looks like we are out of time. Thank you to our panelists and thank you everyone for joining us. Both the slides and the recording will be made available in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Buddy.
Bye-bye.